All right. Noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I now call the Finance Committee to order. First item is public comments. And I see someone approaching the stand. I will recognize David Martin.
Good evening. I'm David Martin. I live on High Street, and I'm a member of the Select Board. During last week's point of view discussion, several things came up which were not correct. I want to make sure that FinCom is working with good information. First, future capital spending was estimated by using the costs of the projects from the capital improvement plan. For several reasons, that's not a valid way of estimating taxes required for capital spending. Typically, a majority of the items in the CIP are not paid for with tax revenue. A majority of the money comes from grants and other sources. Also, other projects are often paid for with free cash. Of course, some of the free cash is recycled tax revenue, but using free cash does not drive tax increases. If free cash is limited, the town manager and the select board propose fewer projects in that year. Finally, the CIP is a list of capital needs, not a prediction of spending. The town manager and the select board only bring a prudent list of the highest need items to town meeting each year. For example, we may have many millions in needs for sidewalks, but only bring a subset to town meeting. Second, the ALG model's $12 million out-year bottom line was mentioned as the magnitude of a future budget imbalance. However, because of the way the ALG model works, that number is wildly incorrect. The net position is carried forward from year to year in the ALG sheet. However, that can never happen in reality. One way or another, the net position is zero every year, and nothing is carried forward to the next year. This inherent error causes the net position to be accumulated in the model when it should only be shown once. Also, per FinCom request, any turnback by the town manager is not considered until free cash is certified. I think that's a really good policy, but it does make the ALG plan inherently pessimistic. The accuracy of the out years was one of the reasons that members of ALG each year expect some of the net position to evaporate. Of course, you all know these problems. FinCom often discusses the need for a better predictive model. With a couple of tweaks, the ALG out years could be made more accurate. But until then, considering such numbers for your point of view as if they are accurate predictions isn't right. Finally, I'd like to refer to my historical expenditures sheet. Please can pass these out. Sorry, I can send it to the committee afterward as a PDF. The values in this sheet are actual values, not estimates or predictions. They're computed from town meeting results, not the ALG model. The rows are similar to those in the ALG expenditures section, except in the ALG plan, the town operating percentage excludes new capital. Here, the equivalent line includes new capital to make it directly comparable with the similar lines from the school districts. Also, share of total rows have been added to each entity. The two columns on the right are 10-year averages. You'll see that the year-to-year average increases for the town is 3.3%. It's 3.4% with excluded debt. Since those numbers include the higher override years, it would indicate that the town manager and select board's prediction of 4.2% in future years is in fact conservative, not too low as was stated in your last meeting. You'll see that the town's share of total expenditures is going down by 0.3% each year. Every year, the town has to find offsets in the budget for a smaller share. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And if you could provide this electronically so that we can include it in the materials for this meeting. Thank you. Are there any other public comments? No? I'm going to just shuffle the agenda just a little bit because we have some people that have some time constraints. So I'm going to come back to approval of minutes, intern corrections, and I'm going to jump to an ALG discussion. Steve? Oh, and for this discussion, I just dropped in the last posted ground rules for the leadership group on this slide. So that's really all that's there. Thank you.
All right, well, I sent out some documents, including the ground rules, and some minutes from ALG meetings, select board meetings, and FinCom meetings. I hope you all read it, because I'm not going to go through it now. When it comes right down to it, the primary goal of the ALG is to produce a multi-year plan, not a one-year plan. Notwithstanding Select Martin's sheet, which I believe, depending on the base year you want to pick, and it doesn't account for the inside debt declining over the last years. And it tends to, let's say, limit the horrendous increases in healthcare we've had in the last couple of years by spreading it out over 10 years. We can all do our numbers. I can say I can come up with a forecast of 5 as opposed to 4. It's insignificant in the bigger picture. Essentially, if our operating expenses for our two entities increase at 5% or more every year, and our taxes increase at 2.5% and maybe 3% with new growth, we have a problem every year. However, what I wanted to get to is the ALG, because it's going to meet, and on the first meeting of an ALG over the years, they set ground rules. And no ALG is bound to observe the ground rules of the prior ALG. So when the discussion comes up, I wanted to make a couple points. First point is that for a variety of reasons, the select board didn't take a fresh look at anything beyond FY27 last year. You can say they relied on last year's forecast, and that's fine, maybe they believed it. The fact of the matter is, they didn't. To me, that violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the primary goal of ALG. In their meeting on March 17th, the manager noted the cost drivers, which have been around for a while, like health insurance, compensation, would probably maybe get to a 5% a year increase. I agree with them. Yet there was no attempt to change. The select board felt they needed more time. So in fact, I feel we didn't actually produce an ALG forecast that we could all agree to. In fact, we didn't. So I've been on this committee for, this is 21 years now. I've been on an ALG at least 7 or 8 times, I've lost count. I've never had this happen before. On April 8th, we requested that our name be removed from what went in the warrant. The warrant, what's published in the warrant, is the only real work product of the ALG. And we didn't agree with it. The guidelines for publishing an official multi-year plan for the warrant say all 3 boards must ratify it before it is official. But we didn't ratify it, and it still got published. There were some words about not having reached consensus on the out years. That's fine. Fact of the matter is, having not reached consensus, then we should have published just the 1 year we did have consensus on, and not the forecast. My opinion, but publishing something else is misleading. We had asked for the town to provide us with a rollout of the so-called 26-liner, which actually has about 30. It's the high level. It's salaries, health insurance, debt, things like that. It's not a very detailed exercise. I can remember the town manager seemed willing, but again, he was told not to go past 27. Under the town bylaws, Chapter B3, the duty to provide long-term fiscal forecasts falls on the FinCom. It seems to me any reasonable request we make, and I would consider this one a reasonable request to support our duty, should have been complied with. It's not a particularly difficult thing to do. We have a very good financial staff. Like I said, I can do one, took me about a half day. I feel like we didn't get the appropriate support that we should get from the select board in this case. So I won't go into any more complaints. I've got a couple of things I'd like to suggest. The first one has to do with ALG. Historically, the ALG plan has kind of been an orphan in the warrant. In this year's no question, it kind of just got hung on the end of the superintendent's message, I think. No dialogue, no description. In the past, we put it at the end of the FinCom message, and we took it as our responsibility to at least throw a couple of paragraphs in the warrant about the long-term plan. I would like to propose to our ALG reps that we go back to that. That presuming we reach consensus, that the multi-year plan be placed at the end of the FinCom message, and that we address the FinCom message, in the FinCom message, some comments about the multi-year plan. I would also like to ask the select board to produce that rollout to FY30 of the 26-liner. I think at one of their meetings in the spring, they said they needed more time to look at it. Well, it's been 6 months, and there's plenty of time to look at it. That's not an ALG issue, but a couple of meetings ago, Scott laid out what he thought were the next steps to getting to a consensus on the DPW plan, and one of them was agreeing on a long-term plan. And so they've had 6 months. Let's see the plan. I would also point out that the DOR's Department of Local Services, in their best practices for forecasting, said you actually should do your plan in like September, October, before you do the detailed budget. I would like the committee to consider that request as well. And I guess finally, I'd like some assurance from the Board of Selectmen that they will not repeat the refusal to provide information to us to fulfill our duties to the citizens.
Just before we go into other people's questions, can you just succinctly bullet point your 4 points one more time, Steve, just so we're all clear? I want the ALG to consider a ground rule that would place the multi-year plan adjacent to the FinCom
message in the warrant so that we can address it. We did it in the past for many years. I would like to see a rollout of the so-called 26-liner out to FY30 as soon as possible. Citing your idea that we need to agree on that before we can proceed on the DPW, it can't come too fast for me. And I would like the assurance that when we make a reasonable request in order to fulfill our duties under the bylaws, that the select board will not refuse it.
Second.
All right, thank you, Steve. All right, a lot of people have their hands up. We'll go around this way, unless Allison's, all right, go Alex, let's march down.
When you say as soon as possible for a better FP&A forecasting model out to FY30, I mean, when you, like, the next meeting, the next FinCom meeting, 2 FinCom meetings from now, because a lot of, I mean, we're starting to get into planning for next year, so as soon as possible to me means the next meeting.
Yes, fine. The next meeting.
Right.
Don't we need the same information from the schools?
We can ask them to update the one they did in the spring.
Does it go out to FY30?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody?
Yeah. Having participated in the creation of the ALG back in 1981, when I was vice chair of the select board, there was no guidance from the state. There was no guidance in the Prop 2.5 referenda issue that had passed. We made this up from scratch in Acton. Not every town has something like the ALG. And it was made up because, guess what? Different boards and committees disagreed back then. Issues were different in some cases. But the dynamic of going to town meeting without a certain common agreed set of assumptions, particularly on the budget, meant the town meeting would be longer, more chaotic, more divisive, and not good for anyone. Now, here we are 40 some odd years later, and if we've come to another bump in the road, we've got another bump in the road. But the point is, the reason why this entity was created all those years ago was to try to come up with a common framework for planning. And it's really hard to plan for the future if the future is defined as 1 year. At that point, you're sort of, I'm going to get there, and then I'll see what happens, and I'm going to get there the next year and see what happens. That's pretty hard to explain to a town meeting. It's pretty hard to explain to a department head. It's pretty hard to explain to a principal, whoever, a taxpayer. So again, I think what Steve has done is, yes, yeah, there's a lot of water under the bridge over the last year, but going forward, if we're going to deal with next year, we're going to have a pretty good idea what the year after and the year after that are going to look like as well. And that then becomes a plan. Plans can get adjusted if new developments occur. But it's sort of essential if we're going to avoid the kind of chaos that can happen and does happen in other communities that do not have a similar process. And so I I seconded the motion because I think what Steve is asking for is perfectly reasonable, but it's also incredibly necessary.
Two points. One is I think we've reached a point where the communication, this happened with the DPW, and I think it's become broad, between this committee and the select board is not in a good place. Watching what they say about our request does not reflect what I'm hearing us say. I think we're, once again, at complete miscommunication level with each other. So if we're willing to go another round, I think it'd be good to have a general discussion with the moderator about the planning process, specifically the budgetary planning. Through my history on this board and being on ALG, is we've run into big problems every year around whether we are planning on a legitimate expectation of growth, budgetary growth, or are we saying 3% and then we just have to figure out how to hit those numbers? And we need to have a really good agreement in here for what that needs to be, so that that can be expressed clearly in there. And then ALG needs to come to agreement. I know they're not going to be, can't be beholden to previous years, but there are strong arguments against having real projections and the whole, I mean, what David Martin mentioned, the whole cascading problems going forward. We have to have a way to explain that is meaningful to people. I mean, I think we all know taxes go up 3%, school budget goes up 6% for the foreseeable future doesn't work. But if that bottom number on the multi-year model is just huge, after a while, like, okay, well, what's the point here? Yeah, we get it, it's bad. But even if it's bad, if the 3% is a good number, or 3.5%, like it doesn't, the numbers quickly become so huge. If we can find a different way to express it, I think it would be more helpful for our communication to the public for planning purposes. Because we stand up there every year, and I did it and said, okay, yeah, you look at it and it says 2 million next year. We can fix 2 million. 2 million isn't a problem. Most people don't know that. They're going to look at it and say $2 million deficit. Oh my God, we're in trouble next year. And then the numbers from there just keep getting bigger and bigger. So some way to explain that to people, I don't know what it is, would be hugely beneficial for our role, would allow us to have the more meaningful model, I think, and actually provide better guidance.
Any other thoughts? Jason?
Trying to not hit this too hard on the head here, but we had a full vote of the committee. We had a full discussion in the committee. We spent almost an hour in a meeting discussing how we should respond to the fact that we did not get to consensus at ALG. And we had a unanimous message to the select board that we did not want our name associated with an ALG multi-year plan, that we did not have consensus on for the multi-year plan. And I do want to be very careful about feels like and things that are feels like versus things that are fact. The fact is we asked them not to put our name again, a name on this spreadsheet. They had a subsequent meeting, which was Zoom, which I've not been able to review, but I did read the meeting minutes, and they decided that, well, since we were along for the ride, our name should be on the sheet of paper, which is an absolute violation of the specific statement sent to the select board saying, do not associate us with this. We did not get to consensus. This is not how the ALG process works. To try and finesse, which is what they did, to try and finesse support for 1 year and say, therefore, the ALG process was good to go, is very inappropriate in my mind. We are not a rubber stamp for what the different taxing entities, whether it be Minuteman, ABRSD, or the municipal side. And to then say, when we sent a unanimous request not to be involved, is a sign of them attempting to finesse us. And I'm not going to do it again.
One more. Go ahead, Alex.
If the end goal of all of this is to put in the infrastructure for long-term financial planning, is FY30 right-sized, or do we want to go out further? And, yeah.
The numbers get pretty screwy, even at 5 years.
They can.
At 10,
Yeah.
it looks ridiculous. Many years ago, I think we attempted a 10-year plan on our own, and it just became, well, you put the numbers together to plan, you plan to be able to take action when you see something going wrong, and in 10 years, everything looks like it's going wrong. So I'd say 5 is good.
That's the story that needs to be told, right? You normalize the historical trends, and you can come up with a good educated guess, and then you continue to reforecast and redraw your baselines every quarter or every 6 months. So then you're actually using it at just about every meeting and looking at, where we're at and what's changing.
I'd like to second Jason's point. I felt that we were disrespected in that, and that's not the first time I have felt it between this select board and our committee, and that's why I would like us to reach a better point between the two of us.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. I will try to internalize this, and we have our meeting on Thursday, and I gotta sleep on it, I think, to find the right words for Thursday. If that's acceptable, I'll try to represent everybody. All right.
I think there was a motion that was made and seconded. Do we want to table it? Is that what you're asking?
No, ALG, the first meeting's Thursday. So
Yeah, but
the message, Greg, the message I got was I got Steve's points, and we have a meeting Thursday, and to try to get his points addressed.
Okay, so
I
do
wasn't
we
putting
withdraw
to
this
a
as a motion and a second?
I did not actually make a motion.
Yeah, there's no motion.
Then I have not seconded it.
Scott asked me to recapitulate. I recapitulated, and you seconded, so there was no motion.
I had asked Steve to just restate it because he made points, and I wanted to make sure it was clear. Okay? All right. So I'm going to jump into a focused discussion on the point of view. Ellie, I'm probably going to have to go off script a little bit because of, I had pre-written a paragraph to read, and I think I need to adjust it just slightly to have it not sound like I'm listening to the people around me. In thinking about this point of view, one of the first things that I wanted to look at is I wanted to look at the ALG model and the forecasts and what happened. This is a little small, I know, but I took the ALG model from 2019 to 2025, looked at funding sources to town spend, Minuteman assessment, and school assessment, and just compared what the model said to what really happened to try to get an understanding how accurate or inaccurate the forecast was. Because as we discuss forecasts and which one's right, which one's wrong, and understanding the history of accuracy, I think is relevant. And one of the points that Steve made in the last meeting, which kind of resonated with me as I was working through this, and he said that the most accurate number in the forecast is the revenue. And second point is that the Finance Committee's objective is to come up with a long-term financial plan. And in my experience, in being involved with this committee the last handful of years, 3 years, so probably 2.5 at this point, I think that there seems to be always the answer that we need always seems to be like 4 or 5 days away. And I want to get to a point of view that isn't waiting for something. So what I did was, as I took the actual percentage of spending for a town, Minuteman, and school based on the 2025 numbers. So town was 33, Minuteman 2.9, and school was 64.1. And since revenue is the most reliable number we have, I ran that out to 2030. And I consider this a baseline. And what I'm saying is, I feel like our core point of view should be is that any deviation where there's an increase in expenditure above the baseline needs to be detailed, line itemed, and explained and justified. And we know that the budgets are going to be worked on for the next 12 months. We know that there's going to be constant changes. And so I feel like, so just looking at the last ALG model and just running this out. So I look at 2026, the variance to the targeted percentage. The next, like if I looked at this for the town, I see 683,000, 959,000. And let me remind everybody, their vacancy last year was 1.2 million. So timing of hires, like that gap could just easily be covered with managing of replacement staff without changing services. The other thing that, when I was looking at the point of view is, and I've talked to a lot of people in town, I have not run into anybody in town that said, we want to have less services or we want the schools to be worse. So I think starting with a baseline that basically assumes what was happening in 25, take the growth, roll it forward, and then let's focus on the things that caused the change, that caused we need an override. We have a financial problem. We have 2 managers of the town and the schools, and everybody has opinions. I feel like they're doing a good job, and they can figure out how to adjust their expenditures to cover gaps. And what's left is going to be a variance to this baseline that there's going to be a justification for that we can dig into and have a conversation about. And I feel like this would be the best way to move forward in the ALG process, because this is our 5-year plan, in my opinion, the baseline, and prove to me that it has to be different, I guess is my opinion. So that's my, and then I know everybody, we have a million things that we always talk about in the point of view. I intend to, have those topics either in appendices or spoken to guidance. But my thought, and agree, like I haven't talked to people about this on the committee. Intention was to talk about this during Finance Committee. But I feel like this gives us a path that, from what I heard from everybody, I feel like this gives us a path to get to where everybody was talking about. So I'll be quiet and I'll let people comment on my thoughts. Alex.
I love that you're putting this together, so thank you. That's comment one. Second comment is, has anyone reconciled this or, double-checked for the accuracy of the baseline, yeah.
These are from the ALG model.
Go straight out of that.
Yeah, I took, all these numbers were from the ALG model. And I just took, I took them, and then I think there was an ALG model from, well, it was right before town meeting.
Right.
That I used. So there is a more current one.
Yeah.
So, but regardless of what the model is, like, if you, further down, I have the percentages. Like, the town's percentage of the budget was the lowest, I think, in 25. So if you're going to argue for a different percentage, the town percentage would be higher. I just took this as a starting point. We can argue about, or we can discuss what percentage is right and all that, but it's an easy number to change. And it changes the whole model, it changes the baseline. The one thing when I did look at this that jumped off the page for me is I feel like in the last ALG model, I feel like the Minuteman assessment is overstated. Looking at the history, looking at the growth of it, it jumps a lot, and if you look at the accuracy of it in the forecast down below, in the middle of this page, it's probably the least accurate number that's forecasted. So I feel like there's noise in that number that needs to get a tighter number around that.
Good segue. That was actually my follow-up question. Did anything surprise you when you were putting this together? So anything else surprise you as you were putting this together besides the Minuteman?
Looking at the change from, in just 6 years, spending has increased 28%. The town has gone from 36% to 33%. The school's gone from 62.5 to 64.1%. And Minuteman's the delta there. I guess I didn't, despite hearing David Martin say it multiple times in public forum, I hadn't seen it myself until looking at this. So those are the things that jumped off the page with me. Oops. Jason?
To that same end, I would be cautious about running out the same percentages, lest someone feel that we're trying to lock in a percentage for the 3 different entities for the next 5 years. So I worry that that's, somebody who just takes a look at this sheet might go, oh, well, we've locked in a ratio between the 3 entities from here on out. And I don't think that's what you intended on doing.
No, it's not the intention, but the reason why I like this approach is there's 3 variables. And we can argue or discuss or determine if those 3 variables are correct. But it gives us a baseline. And all the other ways I've listened to how this has been discussed kind of end up the way we started the meeting. It's a discussion of how one person calculated it different than the other person, and whose calculation is right, and which calculation is wrong. I don't really care whose calculation is right. I want to understand, for the taxpayers, if the tax bill is going up some percentage that's unexpected, what's the driver behind it? And if we have a baseline that just runs things out, and then we're going from that, then I think it's easier for the taxpayer to understand. So then everything that is new, that is additions, like new capital spending, new hires, it basically goes below the line, effectively. And because it's like, okay, this is where it is, and it's fine if, but that's how I would view this working, is that when we get the presentations from everybody, it's like, well, we need to add, 3 people, 4 people. If it's not currently in the town manager's vacancy or the school's vacancy, then it shows up as a new cost below the line that's going to drive the overall percentages, so it's going to be above the baseline. I mean, this is how I budget in my professional job. a complicated item like this that has too many moving parts, you don't boil the ocean. You take a very high-level look at it, and you say, okay, well, what happens if we roll things forward to where we are? And the easiest way to do this, when there's discrepancies, is you just run a detailed P&L, the actual 2025 closing, your budget detailed P&L, and you look at any variance that's over, 3%. And those are your drivers, and just explain them. And there'll be numbers going up and down. Like, for example, like doing this assumption is going to assume like the snow and ice removal is growing by the same amount. And so if we have a down year compared to last year, then that would create some capacity, unexpected capacity in these numbers. But, so just as an example, like just taking this simplistic approach, I don't know, I feel like it gives us a starting point.
I like this approach too. But I think I want to add on to what Jason was saying, because I like the fact that you get to the bottom and you're like, okay, 2030, right, if this projection is, somewhat valid, we're $8.5 million, right, $8 million in the hole by then. But it looks like the driver is the town, the municipal, because it's most of it, it's 4.4 of the 7.9, right?
Yes, but I will caution that I only found one ALG model that had 2030 on it.
Okay. Well, this is all I want to get at really, is that
Yeah,
the.
so I don't know how accurate 2030 is, but my point is that when they come in with a more accurate model, if you drop it against the baseline, it's gonna jump out.
Right, my point is that it's about it's the split. And I know what you're saying, you have to have a starting point, all that stuff, but the school's split has increased while enrollment has gone down. And so that's, like I said, I think that you don't want anybody to think we can get to, or that we're going to stay with the schools at 64% indefinitely as they're continuing to project declining enrollment. So that's a little tweak for them makes a big difference in the split for the town. So let's throw that out there, whatever.
Okay, so just personally, I don't necessarily agree with declining enrollment. Just so you know, and I'm just saying,
What part of it?
what part of it?
Because it's actually way down
It has gone down.
by like 1,000 students.
You think it's going to go down by another 1,000?
Not another 1,000, but going from, we've gone from 6,000 to 5,000, and we have more teachers.
Yeah. So I'm just.
I mean, that's a big decrease. That's not a 0.5%. That's, 17%.
Chrissy?
I'm not going to argue about that. The only thing missing for me in here as a taxpayer is keeping track of excluded debt.
I have the details to do that schedule, and thanks to John, he's provided that detail to me. I did not honestly have capacity to get that done for this meeting.
I'm not sure where it should go in there. It's just for me as a
Yeah.
bottom line, understanding my.
Yeah, I do have all
Tax
those
impact.
details. I intend to model that out. I just, since I hadn't talked to people about this approach, I thought I'd spend the time of the meeting discussing this, and then for the next meeting, depending on where we all land on everything, I can pull in some of the traditional things and the informational items into a more formal structure. So that was my intention. Yeah. Greg?
I like it. And it doesn't represent what I submitted 2 weeks ago, and I still like it. Because what it does, that what I submitted 2 weeks ago didn't do, is avoid the trap of trying to be the surrogate town manager. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're not going to do this, or the superintendent, we're going to do this, we're not going to do that. Guess what? They're doing their jobs. What this does is pull back and say the finance committee is going to focus on setting guidance which we should do. Focus on the finances, which we're supposed to do. And it has a really nice, clear simplicity to it. I don't mean to say it's simple. You've got lots of factors in here, but you know what? This is something, if we had to explain it at town meeting, this is explainable.
That's really kind of where I was going with this, Greg, is that I wanted to have something that, where we were focused on really what the drivers for whatever is the increase that we are fighting with, and not getting lost in the weeds that we don't really need to be in. Okay.
Kudos.
So Scott, these are high-level numbers. How do we get down to the drivers? Because when we do, typically when we've done forecasts, it's off the top number, and it's just escalated by 1%. So we don't really ever say in these ALG forecasts, well, it's going up because health insurance went up, or it's going up because inside debt went up. We don't have that level of detail, is what I'm saying. So how do we translate this analysis, which is very good, into explaining the drivers?
My thought is that I was expecting that numbers would change and more information would be coming in, which I think is kind of what you're saying. And what I guess the way I was thinking about it is that if we have an established baseline and we have drivers that come in, we drop, because on the schedule is the ALG forecast. So I drop in the new ALG forecast, and it's going to spit out variances. And then when we have those variances, I'm going to be asking whoever is the driver behind them to give me the supporting detail. And that's really my point of view, is that we have to understand variances above basically the baseline so that we can explain them and dive into them to whatever level of detail we need to. And so I think that's a fair ask of whoever's numbers they are. Jason.
In the past, we've been told that the municipal budget is much more of a project, has much greater variability due to projects rather than necessarily to just personnel. That rolling out the personnel numbers is a relatively straightforward calculation, but that where some of the larger variances in the municipal budget come from the different projects that are decided to be taken on at any given time. And that goes to what Christy was just saying about we need to make sure that we have a conversation about both inside debt and excluded debt. And just to reiterate what Christy said, to repeat it, what you have here is a very strategic document. It's the high level of what we're recommending, but to not also recommend where we think excluded debt should be means that we would leave an open end for the overall taxpayer, which is something we need to be very careful not to do. I agree with you, Jason. So, I do definitely tend to be on the more tactical side. When I was thinking about what are we going to need to discuss the ALG, are we going to have a conversation about, we're going to have a go, no go on the DPW by the end of October, which is what the ALG traditionally is supposed to do. I'm guessing we're not, but that's, neither here nor there. So from a strategic versus tactical, I'm fine with us deciding to go in a much more strategic perspective, but you cannot, please do not lose track of excluded debt. Otherwise, there's always going to be, oh, gee, surprise, this is the year that we would need to do this project. This is the year that we need to do that project. We got thrown a surprise, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, about stormwater. One of the things I'd love to see in our point of view is, do we as a committee believe that something that has been neglected should suddenly be paid by a different form of tax? Or do we believe that that is something that is part of our municipal responsibilities and should have been, if it hadn't been done in the past, needs to be taken care of now? I realize that's a more tactical question than strategic question, but those are the types of things that I would like us to address as well.
Definitely, Jason, and the next FinCom meeting where we have a more exploded deck with the debt included, and we can make sure that's addressed in the actual point of view document. All right. Greg?
But just to follow up on that, if the VOTEC school is the big delta, that then says one of those tactical things that we should look at sooner rather than later is that one, because we're not the only lever in that game. And we may need to reach out to other towns to discover if they too, in that district, are seeing this as the delta in their budgets, and therefore, let's put it this way, that leads to a whole series of other activities, but, yeah, there are tactical to-dos, even in this first high level, that I'm not sure that we've spent a lot of time talking about the stuff that's in front of us. The regional VOTEC high school, it's out there in Lexington somewhere, right? It doesn't get the same scrutiny.
I would add that I would like to see this sent to me because I can't read a number on that.
Well, Steve, that was the intention. I will happily send her on the schedule with all the numbers on it.
But to Greg's point about Minuteman, there usually is a story behind volatility. And for the past few years, we've been losing students from ABY as to Minuteman. We've now reached our capacity, I believe, at Minuteman, right, Roland? So the volatility should end.
Oh, and just one, before
Then
you
we just
jump in,
get
Roland.
poor budgeting.
Just to say this in public forum, I load all the documents that I show and display onto the town DocuShare site. So I can email this around, but it'll also be available for the public to open up the file and look at themselves. Okay, go ahead, Roland.
Yeah, enrollment, yeah, we're the second largest district at Minuteman. We think we're a little bit lower than we were last year. I could be wrong on that. I don't know if the final numbers are. So, yeah, it fluctuates a little bit year over year. And also, if you remember last year, their budget went down, but they increased fees to their sports things and things like that, so.
That's what I meant by volatility. Theirs went down after years of going up by double digits.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other hands up. Additional topics for the summary. I will send this deck around, make sure everybody has this, but I have what's been in, like, Greg's point of view document, the last 2 point of views that I was a participant in the creation of, Christy and Jason's point of views. I have gathered a bunch of data to make sure that these topics are covered. My intention will be to create a deck that is going to be chopped in half ideally, but I will create as many slides as needed to cover all these topics. If there is something that you find interesting, that you think should be in the point of view that hasn't been discussed tonight, I will add it. And then we can decide if it should stay in or my viewpoint on how this should look is I'm taking like just a couple slides and then a long appendix. So referencing data points and saying see appendix C, D, H, whatever, if you want to see a slide on said item, but not to, drown people in facts they don't want to read or listen to. All right, moving on. I'm on to liaison reports. Actually, no, let me go back to the beginning. I wanted to cover Okay, now we go to approval of minutes. I sent around a document that Ellie sent last week. I didn't have any edits. Did anybody have any edits to the minutes? Need a motion?
I move approval of the minutes of September 9th.
All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted on September 9th?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Just a final tidbit on the corrections for the intern presentations. There were some misstatements on taxes and calculations of revenue and how some of the finances in the town work. Is there anybody that wants to dive into this any more than we previously have? All right, moving on. We did this, we did this, we did this. Christie?
In your creation of the point of view deck, please keep in mind the audience. It's very easy for this to become extremely technical and have business speak that Steve gave me a hard time the very first meeting where I said normal people don't understand, implying that we're not, which, so just that for the pictures, chart small.
Less is more.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I coached for 14 years. If I can't say it in 30 seconds, it's not worth talking about. I had one liaison report. We had they're having a select board meeting every week now. So we had one last Tuesday. And there was a presentation from the fire chief about how the pilot program, where they're doing north and south, they're splitting the town in half, north and to 2 zones, and they're setting up stations and equipment in teams in both the north and the south. From my memory of it, it sounded like it was relatively equal teams to cover what is approximately, it's either the same amount of people or a geographic space or a number of houses. I forget the exact metric, but it was almost an even split. And then the new treasurer was talking about consolidating banks accounts into a concentration account and closing accounts, investing the money, and having an ability to extend investments because they're off of this standard list of stocks into this prudent investor listing that gives them more than 22 stocks to invest in. And Corinne, do you have any other tidbits on that?
Yeah, I think with Chief Arnham's presentation, what I got from that was, in addition to what you have here, was that they have been having some success at filling open positions, and that they might go back to a 3-station setup. If, I guess that would also, they want some updates to whatever that building is. So I think if they had adequate staffing, they would have another firehouse open. So.
My concern, as I've stated before, we were told we need to build another fire station in North Acton because we have a gap in coverage. And now you're taking out the fire station in the center of town, pushing it to the most areas the quickest, other than the area where a fire station is located. So what happens if something happens in South Acton and they're out on a call and a fire happens, now it's going to come from North Acton instead of coming from the center, or an ambulance or something like that. And as we know in life, that's why airlines have hubs. They centrally locate things. So by closing a station in the center of town, and when the original thing was, oh, we're gonna have the North Station, it's gonna take care of the North, because that's where it's a long run if something happens and the center is out and they have to come from the South or West Acton, and now we seem to be going back to where we were.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. John Mangiarotti, the town manager. I heard this mentioned at the last meeting, and I've I meant to follow up with you since then, but since you mentioned it again, I thought I'd take the opportunity, if the chair allows so. There was a significant need for a fire station in North Acton. Even now, the majority of our calls are in the Great Road and north of town. So there's no dispute that the number one need for public safety was a new fire station in North Acton. It didn't, and so now that we have that, we are better positioned to cover a very busy part of town. And that left us with 3 stations in the center and 2 on the southern portion of town that we're splitting up the personnel in. And so over the last 9 months, we've been deploying different ways of using those staffing, using a variation of stations to see if it had any measurable impact, good or bad, on response. That was what part of the presentation was last week, was to give an update on that. We went from, right at the beginning of the pilot, we said, okay, we're gonna put all the people in the north station and the south station, running out of 2 stations. That worked out really well. The north station was built for that many people, so people just fit right in and no big deal. South station hasn't had more than 2 people in it probably ever. So having 5 in there didn't work. It just didn't work. From a response standpoint, it certainly worked, but sort of a space, it didn't work. So we said, okay, we tried that for 2 months. The personnel did it. They didn't complain about it, but they said this isn't really gonna work. So then we said, okay, we'll put the people that are in south and we'll split them up and put them in south and west and finish analyzing the pilot program that way. So we have North Station covering the whole area from Route 2 and up, and the station south and west covering the rest of town. That's worked out pretty well. Not having people in the center, it's noticeable because a lot of people drive by it, but from a response standpoint, we haven't seen an impact that we're concerned with. I think ideally, it would be nice to use that station, but the way we're working right now is with those other 3. This winter, we're gonna replace some major systems at the West Acton Fire Station, so we're gonna slide that crew back to the center, and we're gonna run 3 stations again. So we'll have one in the north, one in the center right over here, and one in south, and west will be closed. And that will be sort of the final phase of the pilot programs to say, okay, the fire department of the future is gonna look different than the fire department of the past. 100 years ago, we had little village stations all over town. In the next dozens of years, it's probably gonna look different than it is now. At least now we have a year or so of data to understand, could we manage if we only had 2 stations, if they were strategically placed? Probably. Is it practical that that's gonna happen in the next 10 years? No, probably not. So, but we have data to understand how to use the stations that we have. So I just wanted to dispel, and I apologize for taking so much time, the thought that somehow the North Station was created and then we all of a sudden changed the program entirely because of it. No, that met a need, and it's still meeting a need. And as we're evaluating the rest of the program, we're trying to sort out the rest of the stations. So hopefully that addressed that. Sorry.
I have a question. Go ahead.
So would it make sense to have this, if you decide after all this study is done and we've run out the model for a couple of years, would it make sense to maybe have an ambulance station at the center? Because it's, again, centrally located, and have more than one ambulance there, so they can get to most of the town quickly.
Yeah, so when we deploy the people out of the center, we're gonna decide how to handle that. Because right now, we have an ambulance running out of the north and an ambulance running out of the south. So at that point, the chief's gonna have to decide, okay, do we keep it that way? Or do we move one of the ambulances to the center? Or, to your suggestion, move them both to the center. That's above, she's the one that's gonna help us figure out what's the right move for that, for the pilot, and we'll take it from there.
I have a question for you, John. And in my discussions and meetings outside of just talking with people, I heard that there might be interest from Boxborough leasing the West Acton Fire Station, because their fire station, which I guess is relatively, I haven't looked at it on a map, relatively close to it, is completely falling apart, and I guess they're trying to get a vote to replace the fire station or rebuild it. And could we lease the space to Boxborough and solve their problem and get some revenue from it?
Appreciate you always thinking of creative ideas. It's funny, I took a walk with the town administrator from Boxborough in West Acton last week, and he mentioned that they're working to try to build a new fire station. He didn't ask if he could lease West Acton, but I think we're not in a position right now to just consider that building surplus. Unless things change significantly, that's not really an option on the table for us right yet.
I hope this is a very premature question, but have there been any conversations about if the South Acton station was too small at 2 people, or is there a new South Acton station that's already being in the developmental stage?
No, I think we know that that station needs to be updated at some point, and before we make major investments in the stations, like I think you saw in the capital plan, we were supposed to replace all the windows. And we're kind of like, all right, hold on. Before we replace all those windows in those 3 1960s buildings, why don't we just make sure we know what we're doing with them first? So, no, there's not a plan to build a new South Station, but eventually we're going to need to figure out what makes sense, whether we invest a lot in that one or in all 3 of them. And I don't think we have that information yet from the pilot period, but we have something, and we know that it's possible. So I think it's been a good use of resources, and the employees have gone through a lot. The firefighters have had a lot of staffing shortages and having to work a lot, and moving to 3 different stations, it has been inconvenient for them too, and I think they've really stepped up. So hopefully, after this year is over, I think once we get through the winter, we'll settle back into a more of a stable mode.
Are we gonna let John sit down, or are you gonna ask him a question, Greg?
Actually, it's not a question.
Okay, all right, so are you free to go?
Well, I have a comment.
Oh, okay.
Well, John, I like what you're doing. What you are doing with the fire department here is admirable. It's exemplary. It's creative. It's trying to find out what the solution for the future looks like. So I just wanted to share kudos.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have any comments on the select board meeting? You good? Is there any other liaison reports? Chrissy?
So I wasn't at last meeting because I was at the EB Forward meeting. The group has finalized the goals effectively for the district and for the project going forward. What do we want in terms of, it's sort of tied into the, what does a graduate look like? We want to give kids a safe place to be type stuff, but I can't remember the exact words because they're still fiddling with it all, dealing with the social emotional and accessibility for all students, environments in which all students, like each student, not just, when they talk about needs, my brain goes to kids who need extra help, but they're talking about needs not just for extra help in terms of catching up with grade level, but for the kids whose needs are beyond. So they are codifying all of those thoughts, and at the next meeting, we'll start looking at some actual ideas that the consultants come up with on what the new system could look like, whatever it ends up being. So the next meeting should be very, very interesting.
All right. Chrissy, can I ask you a question based
Certainly.
on your AB Forward sitting? Is that in your, did you glean anything that they would be like recommending changes in class sizes? Like, the reason why I'm asking the question is, I think at the core, I think the general taxpayer cares about the school rating. And 2 of the drivers for school rating is class size and students in graduate programs, or advanced programs, AP programs, I'm sorry. And are they addressing And I know that, I guess I know that they are focused on student needs first, and that the rating, it doesn't really matter, but I feel like the rating matters to the people that pay taxes.
And the rating is part of what they're looking at. They are trying to figure out how to prioritize needing to make this a sustainable growth, but also, I'm sorry, one second. Keep in mind the values, not just the values of helping the individual students, but the town cares about producing exceptional graduates. And no one is looking to do something that will lower the ranking effectively. They're not saying it in as many words, but that's what I'm hearing. And the ways to get there is what will come out next meeting. So it just hasn't been the sort of meeting that would talk about class size.
All right, can I ask a very simple, probably ignorant question? Is there a focus on, in the AB Forward, are they focusing on, like the, I don't know, the best way to say it is the old school kind of like make sure you know all the facts and like, you know, English, math, like, you know, making sure, is that the focus, or is there a different focus based on your experience?
I'm not sure I follow.
I'm not sure I'm saying it right. You know, your reading, writing, arithmetic, you know, they go to school, like, you know, the, making sure that you have, is the goal to, I don't know, is the goal to try to reach a standard for education, or is there, yeah, of course, on the core subjects, yeah. That's kind of my question.
That hasn't come up specifically. It's, we are in some ways slightly behind the eight ball in the significant growth in the various needs that have changed in the population in terms of English language learners and just people who need more help in schools. So it's kind of how do we keep doing well for everyone and meet those increased needs? And by the way, we know people can't afford the tax increases that would go along with just keeping steady with what we're doing.
And one more question in regards to Conant, not necessarily if they're going to keep it or close it, but I've heard about structural or like building issues with Conant and that it needs repair. And has there been any discussion on Conant as a building?
Not at these meetings.
Okay.
What we went through with Douglas, you can assume that whatever it needs, that it will need something and it will be quite expensive.
Oh, Christy, I'm curious, has there been any discussion about state support, like going forward for these additional costs that schools probably across the state are experiencing? But I know there was some discussion maybe when our representative was here about this as being a high priority, just understanding what support the state is going to be able to provide financially. And I don't know how far out we project that, you know, when the state sets its, what is it, fair share amounts, yeah.
Yeah, I can, we both handled the schools. She took this last meeting, that came up at an earlier meeting this summer. And the state has miraculously come up with more money than we've seen in the past. And it appears that that is sustainable in the sense that it's not a one-year thing, and that led then the school committee to make some changes in some of their assumptions. But the unfortunate reality is the state does its budget once a year, and we lobby for, you know, school funding, Chapter 70, et cetera. Our legislators are all very supportive on that. And we don't find out what the actual number is until sometimes even after the budget deadline. So planning year to year is unfortunately still the way the state works. It would be nice if they had a multi-year plan.
Thank you, both of you. Any other liaison reports?
Yes. Tomorrow night, you are all invited back to this room for the DPW Building Committee. And if you don't want to come back to this room, that's okay. It'll be on ActonTV, and if you can't watch it live tomorrow night, do catch it later. I have not seen more than the outline of the agenda, which I shared with all of you. But the 5 different options that Arrow Street has been looking at, we will get more information. And that is probably going to have a big impact on where we go from here on that topic.
We'll address that in the next meeting, after the meeting occurs. And with no other liaison reports, what's next on my list? Oops. No, that's it. I sent around a schedule for the 2026 meetings. I did it in about 5 minutes, so I did notice that when I got to November, my every other week thing got screwed up, and that I didn't want to schedule something the week of Thanksgiving, so November looks kind of weird. These are our next meetings that are on the screen. So if you just look at the 26 meetings and see if there's anything that doesn't make any sense. If you can also look at the meetings that are scheduled for the rest of the year, notice I did make the edit to change October 15th to October 14th. And I patted myself on the back after I did that. So these are the meetings through the end of this year. If we feel like we need more or less, please advise. You don't have to do it now. You can send me a direct message. And I feel like I'm close to meeting my target of getting out of here by 9.
You can exceed if you end it now.
I'm exceeding it. I think we're going to go to Fred unless there's anybody else. Oh, David's got us. He's going to try to draw us now for another 9.5 minutes. Here it is.
Much less. I just want to say I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. I appreciate Steve's request for ALG and everybody's comments about ALG and the point of view. I feel like many times the Select Board and the Finance Committee are closer than we think we are, or said the other way, that our differences are exaggerated. I think we agree on more than we don't. I do want to say two things. I've always tried to get you guys any documents that the committee has requested. Sometimes, or I will get back to the committee and say, if it's not available or something. But sometimes for an individual member, if they ask me for things, I ask them to get the buy-in of the committee. But I don't think we're trying to withhold any documents from you guys. In fact, there's a bylaw. I think in the bylaw for the Finance Committee, it says you guys are entitled to any documents that we have in order that you need to do your job. And the second thing I wanted to say, I feel bad that you guys feel my word dissed from the process just before a town meeting. We had our meeting on the day before the warrant went to print. We had to make a decision that night. You guys may or may not agree with it, I understand that. We didn't make the decision lightly. I don't think anybody, I don't believe that there was a member of the Finance Committee there that evening to bounce things back and forth with. I don't think anybody suggested, what Steve just suggested tonight, that we could have printed it without the out years. That maybe was a reasonable suggestion. I don't think anybody made that suggestion that night. I don't recall that suggestion anyway. Anyway, I feel bad, and I'm very sorry for that you guys feel this. Never my goal. I value the Finance Committee. I like working with you guys. So I just wanted to say that I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying the way it was, that we had to make a decision the day before the warrant went to print.
Can I respond?
Let Corinne go first.
Sorry, I just had one thing that I should have said during the liaison reports, because I did hear this when I was listening to the meeting the other night, and it pertains to the HVAC system for this building. And The reason this board voted against recommending it at the town meeting was because we weren't convinced that it was the most cost-effective way to move forward. But it sounds like the same plan is going to be put forth this year. And I still haven't, I've requested a few times in these meetings, well before last town meeting, for an analysis showing that it is indeed, that heat pumps are indeed the most cost-effective way to move forward. So I'd still like to see that. I hope we don't see the exact same request this year. Thank you.
David, I agree. We often agree on more issues, and it's fun to disagree, although sometimes that goes too far. But I challenge personally the Select Board to compete effectively for the Chowhound Award at the Restaurant Week. We're going to clean your clocks.
Fred, please, please jump in.
I move to adjourn. Second. All right.
We are adjourned. Oh. Yes, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.